Welcome message. The old keeper of the storytelling hall was just sweeping dust from a forgotten scroll when familiar footsteps echoed at the door, and he couldn't help but laugh, saying that some wandering daoists truly knew how to disappear for 100 days before returning at the most exciting moment. The tea has already been brewed, the ink has been prepared, and tonight's gathering feels like a reunion of old friends sharing rumors from across the jianghu. Come closer, for the next chapter carries a storm that even the ancient records struggle to describe. Introductory Narration, an ancient chronicle of Old Dragon City, recorded a day when the dragon-scaling platform shook beneath the weight of countless destinies. As Zheng Dafeng faced Fuqi's hidden schemes, Chen Ping'an stepped into a deadly clash involving powerful clans, upper five tiers cultivators, and a terrifying force from Parasol Leaf Continent. Yet when all seemed lost and the blade of fate descended, an unexpected figure arrived, bringing with her a sword intent that could make the heavens tremble. Major cold descended upon Old Dragon City like a blade drawn from winter itself. Howling winds swept endlessly across the dragon-scaling platform, rattling rooftops, bending banners, and driving frost through the narrow alley before the dust medicinal shop. Several horse-drawn carriages waited there in silence, their wheels motionless, their drivers subdued, as though even the beasts could sense that this was no ordinary day. By order of the Fu clan, the entire city had been sealed. Itinerant cultivators and ordinary citizens were forbidden from approaching the dragon-scaling platform. Anyone who did not belong to one of the 6 major clans was prohibited from loitering in the streets, much less witnessing the battle that would decide the fate of some of Old Dragon City's most formidable figures. Naturally, wealth and influence could bend even such iron rules. Certain powerful families secured exemptions through their ties to the 6 major clans, granting them passage through the inner city and access to the dragon-scaling platform. In a city ruled by cultivation clans, law was never truly equal. The weak obeyed it, the powerful negotiated with it, and the strongest were the ones who wrote it. Objections spread through the city, but they amounted to little more than angry whispers behind closed doors. The Fu clan's dominance was simply too great. It had warned the influential clans outside the 6 major powers in advance, leaving them no excuse to interfere and no opportunity to gather strength. From time to time, a pampered descendant from some wealthy household would emerge and attempt to make trouble. Each one was suppressed before their protests could become anything more than noise. Few clan cultivators drove them back to their manors, where the reckless troublemakers were met not with sympathy, but with furious condemnation from their own elders. Those clan seniors understood what their juniors did not. A moment of wounded pride could invite annihilation. They cursed the dissenters for nearly dragging their entire bloodline into disaster. This was the cruel arithmetic of the martial world. Dignity could be restored, but a destroyed clan would never rise again. Inside the dust medicinal shop, the atmosphere was far quieter. Julien prepared congee for everyone, and they shared the simple meal before setting out. There was no lavish feast, no ceremonial wine, and no grand proclamation. Yet beneath that ordinary breakfast lay the solemn weight of men and women preparing to walk toward a battle from which some might not return. Zheng Dafeng was the first to leave the shop. Standing at the entrance, he drew several slow puffs from his pipe, his expression loose and untroubled. For once, however, he had abandoned his usual disheveled appearance. He wore a slightly faded but immaculately clean azure robe, as though he had chosen to meet this day with the last measure of dignity owed to a martial artist. Behind him, Julien and Peiqian cleared the table. Beneath the eaves stood Su Yubian, dressed in pristine white, deep infatuation resting upon her back. Framed by the cold wind in the old medicinal shop, she resembled a sword goddess who had stepped down from a painted mountain. Lu Baisheng wore his customary Confucian robe, yet the ghost stones he usually massaged between his fingers were absent, At his waist hung halting snow. That small change revealed more than any declaration could. A strategist who put away his game pieces and carried a sword was no longer contemplating possibilities. He had chosen to enter the board himself. Of them all, Wei Shan was dressed in the most astonishing fashion. Before leaving, he had asked Chen Ping'an whether wearing imperial dragon robes violated any law. You could even wear an empress's dress if that pleased you. Taking the answer at face value, Wei Shan retrieved the imperial robes from his picture scroll and put them on. They were the dragon robes of the founding emperor of Southern Garden Nation, splendid and commanding even after the passage of time. Hidden within one sleeve was the military and armor pellet known as West Mountain. Julien emerged from the kitchen while wiping his hands upon his apron, looking more like an aging chef than a peerless martial artist. Pei Chan followed behind him, her face clouded and her spirits unusually low. Chen Ping'an appeared much as he always did. He wore the golden sweet wine Dao robe and the jade hairpin. His sword-nurturing gourd hung from one side of his waist, while a jade tablet rested on the other. That tablet had once been concealed within an acupoint that housed an extremely tiny wisp of sword chi. According to Fan Junmao, it had undergone only the most elementary refinement. Chen Ping'an could carry it and look upon it, but he could not truly wield it. Thus, its value was not measured by power, it was a keepsake, and more accurately, the vessel of one of Chen Ping'an's few, unwavering fixations. He wished to avenge his parents. He had promised Ning Yao that he would become a mighty sword immortal. He carried a 60-year agreement with the sword spirit, and one day he intended to earn the right for his voice to be heard by all four words. For Chen Ping'an, such promises were not passing ambitions. They were nails driven into the path beneath his feet. Every hardship, every wound, and every impossible choice was endured, because turning back would mean betraying the person he had struggled so fiercely to become. On this day, he also wore a new pair of boots. Pei Chan had secretly delivered them before first light, arriving at the medicinal shop while Chen Ping'an was still sleeping on the floor. When he asked where they had come from, she admitted that she had bought them using the silver they had borrowed from Juniang. Some of that money had been spent on food in Foxtown, but the greater portion had gone toward the boots. She had intended to give them to him much earlier. Then Chen Ping'an tried to send her away and leave her alone at the inn. Furious and hurt, Pei Chan threw a tantrum and buried the boots in the earth. After Chen Ping'an changed his mind and decided to take her to Mirage City, she slipped out at night and dug them up again. Zhang Kui had accompanied her, and while watching her unearth the bundle, he had mentioned something called a cenotaph. From the Mirage City ferry station to the Clear Realm Mountain ferry station, and then all the way to Old Dragon City, Pei Chan remained frightened by that unfamiliar word. She worried that the buried boots might carry some ominous meaning or offend Chen Ping'an. Guilt sealed her lips, and she did not dare present them until this morning. Chen Ping'an was visibly delighted as he pulled them on. He offered little praise, but the warmth in his eyes was impossible to conceal. For a child like Pei Chan, who had learned to survive by reading danger in every face, that quiet look of approval was worth more than silver, food, or treasure. Crouching beside him, Pei Chen watched anxiously as he adjusted the boots.
Do they fit well?
Chen Ping'an nodded. He rose, jumped several times, and tested the soles against the floor. The boots fit well. Then, without softening his tone, he told Pei Qian that she would remain at the dust medicinal shop with the yin soul rather than accompany him to the dragon scaling platform. He warned her that the yin soul would eventually leave the shop as well. Even so, she would remain safe as long as she did not step beyond its doors. Pei Qian was deeply disappointed. She had practiced her deranged demon sword techniques every day in preparation for this occasion, In her mind, all those fierce swings and dramatic stances had surely earned her a place beside Chen Ping'an. Yet she could see that he was entirely serious. There was no room for bargaining. She lowered her head and reluctantly agreed. Chen Ping'an's refusal was not a judgment on her courage. It was the choice of someone who understood that bravery without sufficient strength merely gave death another victim. Chen Ping'an then turned toward Zheng Dafeng with a smile. "So, what will it be? Shall we set off?" Zheng Dafeng drew one final, long breath from his pipe. Smoke curled before his face, briefly veiling his eyes. Then he fastened the pipe at the back of his waist and strode beyond the threshold.
"Let's go."
With those words, Chen Ping'an and the others departed from the dust medicinal shop and climbed into the carriages sent by the Fan clan. Neither Fan-er nor Ma-ji accompanied the carriages. Fan-er had visited the medicinal shop earlier, sharing wine with Chen Ping'an upon the rooftop. During that meeting, Chen Ping'an had firmly warned him not to come anywhere near the shop on the day of major cold. Fan-er understood the severity of the situation and promised that he would not act recklessly. Friendship in the martial world was often proven not by charging into danger together, but by knowing when one's presence would become a burden rather than aid. After the carriages departed, Pei-chan carried a small stool to the entrance of the medicinal shop. She sat down, wrapped both arms around her knees, and stared toward the empty alley. Her trusted hiking pole lay beneath her feet. She rolled it slowly back and forth beneath the soles of her shoes. An oil paper umbrella leaned against the doorway beside her, close enough to seize in an instant. Chen Ping'an had ordered her to keep it nearby at all times, even within the supposed safety of the shop. The Yin soul surnamed Zhao had not yet departed. Whenever Zheng Dafeng snapped his pipe, the Yin soul could immediately appear beside him. Revealing such a hidden piece too early would only give the Fu clan time to devise a countermeasure, so he remained concealed. This was not merely a contest of cultivation, it was a battle of information. Every concealed expert, every unrevealed treasure, and every delayed move could alter the balance at the decisive instant. In struggles between great powers, showing one's full hand too soon was often more fatal than lacking strength. The coming confrontation on the dragon scaling platform was destined to be remembered for generations. Those permitted to stand upon it were among the most powerful figures in the entire city. The Yin soul turned toward the small figure sitting at the doorway.
"Are you worried about Chen Ping'an?"
Pei-chan shook her head without hesitation.
My father is so strong, nothing bad will happen to him.
The Yin soul smiled faintly.
"He is certainly strong, though he is also rather foolish. This affair clearly has nothing to do with him, yet he insists on stepping into it."
To his surprise, Pei-chan did not erupt in anger. Her voice fell quiet instead, carrying an honesty that seemed too heavy for someone so young.
My father isn't foolish. He is only too kind for his own good. Otherwise, he wouldn't bring me along. All I do is waste his money. He is so rich, yet he is terribly stingy. He never wastes money on anything. If he could, he would split a single copper coin into pieces before spending it.
The more she spoke, the more dejected she became. She drew the yellow treasure pagoda, demon-suppressing talisman from her sleeve and slapped it onto her forehead. Then she tilted her head back and blew upward, making the talisman flutter before her face. Her faith in Chen Ping'an was absolute, but beneath it lay the fear that she herself was unworthy of his kindness. That fear explained why the boots mattered so much. They were not merely a gift. They were her clumsy attempt to prove that she could give something back. Meanwhile, 3 horse-drawn carriages rolled from the inner city toward the outer city. In the leading carriage sat Zheng Dafeng, his eyes closed as though resting. He was already exerting every shred of control to suppress his fist intent, yet it still threatened to spill from his body. Whenever a wheel struck even the smallest bump, a burst of invisible force escaped like thunder beneath the skin, only to be seized and dragged back under control an instant later. Zheng Dafeng's greatest struggle had already begun before he reached the platform. His power was not absent, it was overflowing. The danger lay in containing it until the precise moment when one released fist could decide life and death. Chen Ping'an had initially intended to share a carriage with Zhu Lian, but Sui Yubian entered first. Zhu Lian could only leave him to her and join Wei Shan and Lu Baishan in another carriage. Inside the carriage, Chen Ping'an and Sui Yubian sat opposite one another. Deep infatuation rested across her lap, its scabbard separating them like a silent boundary.
Did your opinion of Lu Baixiang change because he was the first to reveal the phrase given to him? And do you dislike me because you sensed the killing intent I showed you at the border inn?
Chen Ping'an did not answer either question. Instead, he raised one of his own. The old Taoist priest assured me that all four of you would remain absolutely loyal after emerging from the picture scrolls. Did he alter your minds to guarantee it? After a moment of reflection, he continued, answering his own suspicion. I don't believe that is what happened. You once revealed killing intent toward me, and all four of you have always seemed like living, breathing people. As long as someone is human, their emotions will fluctuate, no matter how thoroughly they temper their state of mind. No one can guarantee that they will never change. That is why I cannot understand how the old Taoist priest could be so confident that none of you would ever turn against me. Chen Ping'an was not questioning their humanity. He was questioning the mechanism of their loyalty. Blind trust might appear virtuous, but in a world filled with hidden restrictions and ancient schemes, refusing to examine one's chains was simply another form of recklessness.
Do you not trust him?
On this matter I do. Sui Yubian ran one hand slowly across the scabbard of deep infatuation. Then she revealed the secret that had bound the four figures from the picture scrolls together.
Aside from the 4 unique phrases given to each of us, there was one additional phrase told to all 4. I cannot be certain about Wei Xian, as he never speaks with us privately. At the very least, Lu Baixiang, Julian, and I all know it.
Can you tell me? A wry smile touched Sui Yubian's lips.
I suppose there is no harm in telling you. We were told that whoever kills Chen Ping'an will become the only one to gain freedom.
The carriage continued forward, but for a heartbeat, the revelation seemed to still the entire world.
Had you summoned me from my picture scroll first, I would have tried to kill you regardless of the cost. Why Wei Xian made no attempt on your life despite being summoned first is beyond me. During the battle at the inn, you released the other 3 of us. From that moment onward, all 4 watched one another, ensuring that no single person could seize the sole chance at freedom. That mutual vigilance became the guarantee of your survival.
The old Taoist priest had not created loyalty through affection or obedience. He had constructed a perfect deadlock from desire. Each of the 4 wished for freedom, and that very wish forced them to protect Chen Ping'an from one another. It was a prison built not from chains, but from hope. Chen Ping'an's brows drew together as he recalled Wei Shan's earlier words. At the mountain temple, Wei Shan personally told me that if I died, all of you would die as well. Doesn't that contradict what you have just said? Sui Yubian smiled, though there was little warmth in it.
Then either Wei Shan lied to you, or the master of the Lotus Flower Blessed Land had already foreseen that Wei Shan would be summoned first and deliberately withheld the promise of freedom from him. Whatever the truth concerning Wei Shan may be, Lu Baixiang, Julian, and I will not allow anyone among us to kill you. Should one of us attempt it in secret,
The other two will hunt that person until one side is destroyed. None of us is willing to surrender our own chance at freedom. You once reached the pinnacle of the lotus flower blessed land, so you should understand that freedom is not a casual desire for people like us.
Chen Ping'an did not argue over what freedom meant to them. He merely released a quiet sigh. No wonder people say the heavens can never be outwitted. No matter how carefully one schemes against them, one always remains a step behind. Yet the true terror of the arrangement was not that the heavens had foreseen every move. It was that every possible choice had already been woven into the design. Whether the four cooperated, betrayed, waited, or fought among themselves, Chen Ping'an remained trapped at the center of the same net. Su Yubian studied him from across the carriage.
Even if you survive this ordeal, the losses you suffer will be enormous. Is it truly worth it?
The world was vast, and cultivators had long placed themselves far above mortal concerns. Within such a world, countless people and countless causes could be dismissed as unworthy of sacrifice. Chen Ping'an gave no answer. He closed his eyes and began practicing his standing meditation, even as the carriage continued to sway beneath him. His silence was itself an answer. Chen Ping'an did not measure worth by profit, safety, or the approval of powerful cultivators. Once he believed something had to be done, the price ceased to decide the matter. The only remaining question was whether he possessed the strength to bear it. The three carriages passed beyond the outer city and continued toward the dragon scaling platform. At the same time, Fu Qi began ascending the platform alone. The Fu clan's nascent tier patriarch was nowhere to be seen. At the foot of the platform stood Fu Donghai, Fu Chunhua, Fu Nanhua, Chu Yang, and numerous Fu clan guest elders. Each occupied a different place in the same unfolding storm, carrying private ambitions, fears, and calculations. Chu Yang watched with a cold expression. His previous battle against Zheng Dafeng had enabled him to break through to the nascent tier, yet he had already informed Fu Qi that regardless of the coming battle's result, he would take no further part in the affair. He had already made an exception by leaving his thatched cottage by the sea and coming to the Fu clan to stop Zheng Dafeng. In his eyes, that act exceeded everything reasonably expected from a guest elder. Fu Qi accepted the condition without objection. Chu Yang needed only to observe. Once the matter ended, no one would disturb his secluded cultivation again. Chu Yang's decision was not cowardice. Having gained his nascent tier breakthrough, he understood precisely how dangerous the struggle had become. A cultivator who survived one great gamble did not necessarily owe the heavens a second. Fu Donghai stood completely expressionless, concealing every trace of emotion. He had once believed his scheme against Zheng Dafeng would become a glorious contribution to the clan. While Fu Nanhua basked in attention and prestige, Fu Donghai intended to strike from the shadows, surpass his brother, and earn Fu Qi's favor. Instead, the scheme produced an outcome he had never imagined. Zheng Dafeng had severely injured him, and afterward, Fu Qi did not visit even once. There was no reprimand, no comfort, and no acknowledgement. Fu Donghai was treated as though he had already died. That indifference tormented him more than punishment would have. A father's anger still recognized the existence of his child. Fu Qi's silence suggested something far colder. Fu Donghai had become irrelevant. Fu Qi was not only the leader of the Fu clan, but also the lord of Old Dragon City. In most matters concerning the clan and the city, he had always appeared remarkably easygoing. He did not habitually bully the other major clans into submission. Even useless Fu clan descendants who lacked the ability to cultivate were treated generously. Yet this very tolerance made his rare displays of coldness all the more terrifying. When Fu Chi's unforgiving side emerged, even his own children, including Fu Donghai and Fu Chunhua, could not help but fear him. The gentlest ruler is sometimes the most frightening when angered, because no one can pretend his severity arose from habit. It means a line has truly been crossed. Fu Chunhua watched her father ascend the dragon-scaling platform with an absent-minded expression. Her thoughts returned to the occasion when Fu Chi had taken her to meet Zheng Dafeng. That meeting had gone neither well nor poorly. It merely established that Fu Chi and Zheng Dafeng walked separate paths that had no reason to cross. Both sides agreed to remain out of each other's way. Fu Donghai's sinister little scheme shattered that fragile equilibrium. Yet from her position as an observer, Fu Chunhua could assess the situation more calmly than those consumed by pride or resentment. She realized that Fu Chi was not truly angry at Fu Donghai for what he had done. If anything, he was quietly pleased by how events had unfolded. Fu Chi had long since abandoned his expectations for Fu Donghai, yet through his blunder, Fu Donghai had unknowingly provided the catalyst for a sequence of events. Fu Chi had wished to set in motion, but had never found the proper opportunity to begin. Fu Donghai believed he had acted as a schemer, but in truth he had become another man's opening move. This may be the chapter's sharpest reminder that ambition without vision does not make someone a player. It merely makes them a useful piece. Among the three siblings, Fu Nanhua appeared the most bored and detached. In his mind, the outcome was already certain. Zheng Dafeng would die upon the dragon-scaling platform. There was nothing more to consider. His thoughts drifted instead toward the woman of the Zhang clan whom he had recently married. On their wedding day, the two had spoken openly and laid out the terms of their marriage. Fu Nanhua found those terms entirely acceptable. Contrary to the rumors, his new wife was not hideous. Her appearance was at least comparable to Jin Su of Osmanthus Island, for whom Fu Nanhua had once harbored affection. Even so, he had no intention of becoming physically intimate with her. On their wedding night, an elderly maidservant from the Zhang clan stood in the corner of the room, observing his every movement like a hawk watching prey. The old maidservant was a seasoned nascent-tier swordswoman. Fu Nanhua naturally had no courage to cross her. He merely glanced at his newlywed wife and immediately received a freezing glare from the maidservant. After that warning, Fu Nanhua obediently kept his distance from both women, visiting them only when absolutely necessary. To her credit, the Zhang clan woman honored every part of their agreement. She even paid the expenses whenever Fu Nanhua went drinking with his companions. Fu Nanhua considered the arrangement exceptional and reminded himself to remain satisfied. The marriage had never been about affection. It was a ceremony marking the alliance between the Fu clan and the Zhang clan. As long as he possessed sufficient wealth, he believed he could still find several women in Old Dragon City whose beauty rivaled that of his wife. While Zheng Dafeng approached a battle that might claim his life, Fu Nanhua remained preoccupied with comfort, appearances, and convenience. That contrast is deliberate. One man was prepared to stake everything upon the platform. The other had inherited so much security that he could no longer recognize danger until it stood before him. And when certainty becomes arrogance, the heavens often need only one unexpected fist to shatter it. At the foot of the dragon-scaling platform, the great clans of Old Dragon City had already taken their places. The Ding clan stood at the center, flanked by the Fang clan and the Hao clan, as though three old powers had drawn invisible borders across the earth. Yet Du Yan, the direct disciple of Parasol Leaf sect and the Ding clan's greatest backer, was nowhere to be seen. To the three clans, his absence was an unexpected blessing. Without that towering presence pressing down upon them, their conversation flowed more freely. No one had to weigh every syllable, fearing that a careless remark might offend a disciple of a sect powerful enough to shake an entire continent. Parasol Leaf sect was not merely a dominant force. It was so formidable that the continent beneath it bore its name. Even if every major clan in Old Dragon City joined hands, they still could not hope to contend with it. And such an alliance would never exist in the first place. The clans of Old Dragon City had spent generations competing for wealth, territory, reputation, and fortune. Before an outside enemy could unite them, their own suspicions would tear the alliance apart. Eastern Treasured Vile Continent was the smallest of the 9 continents. Parasol Leaf sect, meanwhile, stood at the summit of Parasol Leaf Continent. The difference between them was not a mere gap in strength. It was a gulf between 2 worlds. The Fang clan and Hao clan were secretly relieved that Duyan protected the Ding clan only because he had married a woman of their bloodline. Had the connection between the Ding clan and Parasol Leaf sect run any deeper, every other major clan in the city would have been forced to sleep with one eye open. Of the 3 clans, the Fang clan was presently in the most miserable state. Their manor had nearly been demolished by Zheng Dafeng, and the humiliation still hung over the clan like smoke after a battlefield fire. Yet the young Fang clansman whose actions had helped provoke the disaster showed no trace of shame or restraint. His face was bright with anticipation as he chatted animatedly with a friend from the Hao clan. How could he not be delighted? In his mind, the madman from the dust medicinal shop was about to be beaten to death before the eyes of the entire city. He had already prepared a mountain of silver for a grand celebratory banquet. Once he returned to Old Dragon City, he intended to drag every female employee of the dust medicinal shop, regardless of age or appearance, into the lowest brothels of the city. Even after Zheng Dafeng crossed into death, the young man planned to continue taking revenge upon everything the man had once protected. This was no longer a desire to restore clan honor. It was the cruelty of someone who believed victory had already been guaranteed, and therefore felt free to punish the helpless. Such arrogance often flourishes brightest in the final moments before fate turns its blade. Far from the Ding, Fang, and Hao clans stood the Sun clan and Fan clan. Very few of their members had come to witness the battle. Sun Jiashu was absent. The Fan clan had dispatched only an old man from its ancestral hall, accompanied by a handful of talented side-branch clansmen. Then 3 horse-drawn carriages rolled into view. The crowd did not point. No one jeered. Even the Fang clan's triumphant young man fell silent, his smile vanishing as though cut from his face. Whatever their private temperaments, everyone present represented a clan. To behave like a street hooligan here would not merely disgrace an individual, it would stain the ancestral name carried on their backs. Not one clan had brought hovering pavilions, miniature flying ships, or other immortal artifacts to watch the battle from the sky. All remained obediently at the foot of the platform, relying on enchanted picture scrolls to observe what would unfold above. No command had been issued, yet no one dared suggest otherwise. This was the power of reputation refined over thousands of years. The Fu clan did not need to bare its fangs. The survival instincts of Old Dragon City had already taught everyone where not to stand. The 3 carriages stopped near the foot of the dragon scaling platform. Members of the Fu clan watched with mocking expressions, but none dared leap forward to provoke Zheng Dafeng. A careless insult could earn them death. Worse still, it would embarrass the Fu clan. If they died after shaming their own family, no one from the Fu clan would avenge them. Zheng Dafeng stepped down from the carriage and climbed the platform alone. He left no final words for Chen Ping'an or the others, no heroic declaration, and no backward glance. That silence suited him better than any farewell. A man walking toward possible death has no need to decorate the road with empty courage. Chen Ping'an surveyed the surrounding clans only briefly. His gaze soon returned to the stone staircase, following Zheng Dafeng's solitary ascent. In the distance, Fu Nanhua studied Chen Ping'an with open surprise. The dark-skinned boy from Clay Vase Alley had changed beyond recognition. Only a few years had passed since their previous encounter, yet Chen Ping'an now possessed the confidence to return to Old Dragon City without avoiding Fu Nanhua, and even to step willingly into this deadly entanglement. Fu Nanhua also recalled Kai Jinjian of Dawn Cloud Mountain. She had come to Old Dragon City to congratulate the Fu clan on its marriage alliance with the Zhang clan. He had been certain she died inside Jewel's small world. Instead, she had survived and advanced dramatically in cultivation. Even more puzzling was the strange attitude she had displayed during their last meeting. To Fu Nanhua, these changes were warnings. People he had once regarded as insignificant pieces were returning stronger, stranger, and increasingly difficult to control. Zheng Dafeng finally reached the summit. Chen Ping'an continued looking upward, but the vast sea of clouds swallowed the peak from sight. Only someone aboard a vessel high above the city could look down and witness the summit of the dragon-scaling platform. According to Zheng Dafeng, this sea of clouds had hovered above Old Dragon City for thousands of years. It was not merely scenery, it was the fundamental source of the city's power. Its history stretched back to the arrival of the final true dragon in Eastern Treasured Vial Continent. From that event came the underground dragon channel. Then came cultivators falling like rain after the bloodshed in Jewel's small world. The crab archway, the small town, the ancient well, and the snowy night when a young girl collapsed before Chen Ping'an's ancestral home in Clay Vase Alley, nearly freezing to death. Chen Ping'an saved that girl. Later, she became Song Jishin's maidservant. During the journey through the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, a journey that seemed to span countless years and an immeasurable distance, the old Taoist priest from the East Sea had told Chen Ping'an that every event in the world could be traced to its source. Human thoughts were no exception. Cause and effect were not chains visible to ordinary eyes. They were hidden currents beneath the world, joining a dragon's arrival, a ruined small world, a snowy rescue, and the choices of people who believed they were acting freely. Yet this truth remained too profound for Chen Ping'an to fully explore. Far above the crowd, Fan Junmao lay upon the boundless sea of clouds. She stared blankly into the heavens, wishing her vision could pierce just a little farther. The girl who had climbed the dragon-scaling platform earlier wanted to seize control of the sea of clouds from her, most likely to repair the robe forged by the Fu clan. If she succeeded, the old dragon robe might rise from a pseudo-celestial tool to a true celestial tool. Fan Junmao regarded the matter with absolute seriousness. This was a contest of the great Tao, more dangerous than an ordinary struggle for survival. Flesh could be destroyed and lives could be lost, but once a cultivator's great Tao was severed, there might be nothing left to return from. For someone like Fan Junmao, dying once meant little. So long as her great Tao remained intact, she could return. Thus, only one person absolutely could not be allowed to die, the old man in the Yang family's medicine shop. As long as old man Yang remained alive, Fan Junmao, Li Liu, and all others chosen by him could never be considered truly dead. Was Fan Junmao afraid of anyone else in the world? No. Not even if the founders of the three teachings descended upon Old Dragon City and erased her existence with powers surpassing Old Man Yang's, she might hate them. She might resent them until heaven and earth collapsed, but she would neither fear nor revere them. In this respect, Fan Junmao and Ji Gui were remarkably alike. Their great Taos opposed one another, yet neither possessed the instinct to bow. It was precisely this resemblance that made their conflict feel inevitable. Without warning, Fan Junmao sat upright and turned a perplexed gaze toward Fu Qi. Zheng Dafeng had reached the summit, where Fu Qi awaited him. Yet Fu Qi had come strangely unprepared. He had not borrowed the pseudo-celestial tool belonging to the Fu clan's nascent tier ancestor. He was not wearing the old dragon robe, nor did he carry the pseudo-celestial tool that guarded the ancestral hall. He could not control the sea of clouds overhead. The only treasure in his possession was a pseudo-celestial tool recently purchased from another continent, an ownerless flying sword left behind by a deceased sword immortal. For a clan lord entering a supposedly decisive battle, this restraint made no sense. Either Fu Qi had abandoned victory, or the true killing move was never meant to occur on the platform. Fan Junmao struck the sea of clouds beneath her with one palm. The immense cloud sea plunged downward, swept around the dragon-scaling platform, and instantly enveloped the whole of Old Dragon City. At the same moment, she bit through the skin of her index finger and used her own blood to inscribe a talisman across both palms. It was an ancient talisman lost for countless years. The modern chi refiner ability to observe mountains and rivers through one's palms was merely a pale imitation of this forgotten art. When the final stroke was complete, Fan Junmao's complexion had turned pale. She pressed her palms together, then violently spread her arms apart. Images flickered across her hands, appearing and vanishing faster than swordlight. She stared into them, searching for the hidden threat. The Fu clan's ancestral hall. The Sun clan's ancestral residence, the Dust Medicinal Shop. Scene after scene flashed past. Then the vision stopped upon an elderly figure standing atop the outer city wall. The blood talisman shattered instantly. The flesh of Fan Junmao's palms tore open. Blood surged into her throat, but she forced it back down. In that single divination, she had lost cultivation equivalent to more than 10 years of effort for an ordinary nascent tier earth immortal. She did not care. Her thoughts remained fixed upon the elderly figure glimpsed in the instant before the talisman collapsed. She could tell that he was at least a 12th tier chi refiner. Could it be that old monster from Parasol Leaf sect? Fan Junmao was usually indifferent even when mountains collapsed before her. Now, however, her brows drew tightly together. If Fu Qi killed Zheng Dafeng on the dragon scaling platform, then Zheng Dafeng could blame only himself. But if he survived the duel only to be ambushed by an outsider afterward, that was an entirely different matter. Old Dragon City had always been her territory. Yet was Zheng Dafeng, a man she did not even particularly like, worth sacrificing Fan Junmao's life to protect? The question sounded like a choice, but it was not. Her pride, her territory, and her great Tao had already been dragged into the matter. Whether she admitted it or not, the outsider on the wall had challenged more than Zheng Dafeng's life. Fan Junmao lay back upon the clouds and silently weighed her options. Objectively, there were none. She closed her eyes and released a faint sigh. At the very least, she had decided not to watch Zheng Dafeng die. Suddenly, the entire dragon-scaling platform began to tremble. The waters of the East Sea and South Sea roared against the shore. Waves surged like armies charging a fortress, only to be suppressed by the mystical abilities of the Earth Immortals stationed throughout the city. Not far from the island ferry station, a young daoist stood upon a gigantic golden gourd floating over the sea. A broad smile stretched across his face. Chen Ping'an's oil paper umbrella could conceal his aura, and had once preserved his life. Yet the same concealment prevented his backers from divining his location and sending reinforcements in time. A treasure that hid him from enemies also hid him from allies. Its greatest strength had become its most dangerous weakness, a double-edged blade that cut according to circumstance rather than loyalty. The young Taoist looked toward Old Dragon City with unconcealed delight. In his eyes, Chen Ping'an had finally offended the one man on Parasol Leaf Continent who could not be offended. Had the enemy come from Jade Tablet Sect, Planchette Writing Sect, Peace and Tranquility Mountain, or almost any other faction, even another expert of Parasol Leaf Sect, Chen Ping'an might still have found a path through. The Taoist acknowledged that Chen Ping'an possessed many hidden methods. Against anyone at the same cultivation base, he had little to fear. He might even survive a clash with a Golden Core or nascent tier Earth Immortal. An unpolished Jade tier cultivator of the upper 5 tiers might consider it beneath their dignity to bully a young pure martial artist. An Immortal tier cultivator might see more deeply into the matter and choose not to act. Unfortunately, the enemy waiting in the shadows was the most unreasonable person in all of Parasol Leaf Sect, and the second most powerful cultivator on the entire Parasol Leaf Continent. Against such an opponent, courage could not close the distance in power. Even if Chen Ping'an sacrificed every treasure, shattered every escape route, and wagered his life for Zheng Dafeng, the Taoists believed the result had already been written. And if Chen Ping'an died, the young Taoist could simply carry his body back to the Taoist temple and use it as fertilizer for the lotus flower blessed land. His schadenfreude deepened into a chuckle.
There are going to be some hard times ahead for Eastern Treasured Vial Continent.
The battle atop the dragon-scaling platform ended in less than an hour. When a figure emerged from the clouds and descended the staircase, astonishment swept through the gathered clans. The man walking down was Zheng Dafeng. He appeared uninjured. He certainly did not resemble a man standing at death's door. Fu Donghai and Fu Chunhua stared in disbelief. Could Fu Qi be dead? If so, the outcome might not necessarily be unfavorable to them. The two exchanged a glance, and a silent understanding passed between them. Even within the Fu clan, blood ties did not erase ambition. The possibility of Fu Qi's death brought shock, but also opportunity. Fu Nanhua alone remained calm, a faint smile still resting upon his face. A voice sounded within his mind's lake. Fu Nanhua turned one hand over and made an almost imperceptible gesture. At the Ding clan's position, an elder immediately stepped forward and whispered into the clan leader's ear. The Ding clan leader then hurried to the leaders of the Fang and Hao clans. A secret conversation followed. The two leaders reacted differently, but both eventually nodded. Fu Nanhua's gesture was no larger than a falling leaf, yet its effect was like a boulder plunging into a still lake. The waves had begun spreading before most people even realized the water had been disturbed. Zheng Dafeng descended without speaking and entered one of the 3 carriages together with Chen Ping'an. The moment the carriage concealed him from the crowd, the illusion of invulnerability collapsed. His complexion turned deathly pale, and his voice emerged rough and strained.
Fu Qi surrendered halfway through the battle. He never intended to fight me to the death.
Blood began seeping from Zheng Dafeng's ears as he continued.
He refused to push me hard enough to break through my 10th tier bottleneck. He didn't use a single pseudo-celestial tool either. He merely exchanged enough blows with me for both of us to suffer injuries, then forfeited without warning. That means we'll definitely be attacked before we reach the medicinal shop. Decide now, Chen Ping'an. Will you leave the carriage here or return with me?
Fu Qi's surrender revealed the true design. The duel had never been intended to kill Zheng Dafeng. It had merely weakened him, preserved the Fu clan's public dignity, and delivered him into an ambush where another hand could finish the work. Chen Ping'an answered without hesitation, his tone as steady as stone beneath running water. Fuchi may be a shameless scoundrel, but I still value my dignity. Zheng Dafeng tilted his head and wiped away the blood flowing from his ears. Despite the pain, he laughed.
Do you actually believe that? If dignity mattered so much to you, would you have delivered letters around town every morning for a few copper coins?
Why would that be shameful? I performed work and received payment. To Chen Ping'an, dignity had never meant standing above ordinary labor. It meant refusing to betray the principles by which he had chosen to live. Carrying letters for coins was honest. Abandoning a companion to save himself was another matter entirely. A bitter smile appeared on Zheng Dafeng's face.
Do I have to beg before you'll leave?
Even if you beg, I'm not going anywhere. Zheng Dafeng leaned back, thoroughly defeated, not by a fist, but by the stubbornness of the young man before him.
What in the world are you trying to accomplish?
Chen Ping'an hesitated for a moment before revealing what had been troubling him. The breakthrough I made during my last stay in Old Dragon City was strange. At the time, I couldn't understand what had happened. But after returning from the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, the moment I entered Old Dragon City again, my instincts warned me that a sinister force was hiding inside my heart. If I leave, that force will immediately break free and wreak havoc. Perhaps this is the inevitable tribulation I must endure for defying heaven and reconstructing my bridge of immortality. When I crossed the stone arch bridge, I thought heaven and earth had finally accepted me. Now I understand that feeling was only an illusion. In truth, majestic world has finally turned its attention toward me. If I flee today, I may spend the rest of my life fleeing. Reconstructing the bridge of immortality had allowed Chen Ping'an to reclaim a path that should have remained broken. Yet going against the natural order carried a price. His present danger was not merely an ambush by powerful cultivators. It was a confrontation with the consequences of defying heaven itself. Zheng Dafeng believed his explanation. Even so, he remained convinced that Chen Ping'an was using it as an excuse to stay.
Even if that's true, don't throw away your life because of me. Go sacrifice yourself for someone else. I probably won't survive today, so don't make me owe you such an enormous favor before I die. Go to Lier. Go find your friend Liu Xianyang. Just don't remain here and die for nothing.
Beneath the sarcasm and rough language, Zheng Dafeng was trying to save Chen Ping'an. He had accepted the possibility of his own death, but he could not accept dragging another person into the grave beside him. Chen Ping'an pointed toward Zheng Dafeng's eye. Your eye is bleeding. You weren't especially handsome to begin with, so clean yourself up. Otherwise, no woman will ever take an interest in you. Honestly, the girl who worked for you must have had terrible taste. Even she wouldn't like you anymore if she saw you in this state. Caught between annoyance and amusement, Zheng Dafeng sent a light kick toward him. Chen Ping'an casually swatted the foot aside. Their joking did not erase the danger. It revealed how both men chose to face it. Zheng Dafeng hid concern beneath mockery. Chen Ping'an answered fear with ordinary conversation, refusing to let impending death dictate the final shape of the moment. The three carriages turned toward Old Dragon City and began the journey back. Each coach driver was a Fan Clan servant who had sworn a death pledge. None showed panic. Their hands remained steady upon the reins, and their faces were calm. They knew an ambush waited somewhere on the road ahead. Yet the wheels continued to turn. The duel on the dragon scaling platform had ended, but the true battle had only just been unsheathed. The convoy had traveled nearly 10 kilometers when the first blade of resistance appeared on the road ahead. Two guest elders of the Fang clan stood in their path, one a 7th-tier martial artist, the other a golden core tier cultivator. Neither had come to exchange courtesies. Their presence was a declaration. Old Dragon City had begun closing its jaws. Zheng Dafeng immediately rose to leave the carriage, but Chen Ping'an lifted one hand and stopped him. Sui Yubian was the first to step down. Her figure carried the cold stillness of an unsheathed sword. Lu Baixiang followed, yet he did not advance beside her. Sui Yubian would confront the Fang clan's two guest elders alone for the moment, while Lu Baixiang moved behind two of the carriages, keeping himself close enough to reinforce her the instant the situation turned deadly. This was not reckless separation. It was a deliberate division of force. Every expert left behind would delay one more enemy, preserve one more carriage, and buy Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng another fragment of distance. Yet every separation also meant that the convoy's strength was being peeled away layer by layer. Farther back, another carriage halted beneath the pressure of the Hao clan's guest elders. Julien leaped down without hesitation. Soon after, a third carriage stopped, and Wei Shan began walking beside the carriage, carrying Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng. Then came the guest elders of the Ding clan. Wei Shan wore his imperial dragon robe beneath the protection of his West Mountain armor pellet. He stopped in the middle of the road, his broad silhouette standing like the final remnant of a fallen dynasty, while the carriage continued onward without him. Zheng Dafeng watched one defender after another disappear behind them. His brows drew tightly together, and he slowly shook his head.
The situation has already gone far beyond anything we expected. The battle on the dragon scaling platform ended better than any of us dared hope. But what we're facing now is worse than our darkest prediction. The Fu clan no longer cares about preserving the dignity of the Cloud Forest Jiang clan. What could have happened to make them so fearless?
As the eastern gate of Old Dragon City's outer city drew near, Chen Ping'an raised the carriage curtain. The wind outside carried no scent of peace. It carried only the silence that descends before a killing formation closes. It means the upper 5 tiers cultivator hiding behind everything has finally stepped forward, and that person is most likely above the unpolished Jade tier. Otherwise, the very least they could be is an unpolished Jade tier swordsman. Only someone of that weight could force the Cloud Forest Zhang clan to swallow its pride and endure this humiliation. Whoever is waiting for us must have become entangled with Old Dragon City long ago. Killing you is probably only an additional reward attached to a far more important bargain. As for the Fan clan, they may already have been pushed out of that bargain and marked for separate punishment. Whether Fan Junmao intervenes or remains silent, the Fan clan could already be standing at the edge of ruin. Chen Ping'an's deduction revealed the true shape of the trap. This was no longer a personal ambush aimed solely at Zheng Dafeng. Several great clans, hidden agreements, and an expert powerful enough to disregard the Zhang clan were moving at once. When the hand behind the board finally appeared, everyone else became only a piece to be sacrificed. A bitter, self-mocking expression crossed Zheng Dafeng's face.
Then I was never meant to survive today. At this point, all I can hope for is that the one waiting ahead gives me a chance to break into the 10th tier before I die.
The carriage rolled a little farther, then came to a slow halt. Chen Ping'an lifted the curtain and looked toward the top of the city wall. I don't think he'll grant you that chance. Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng stepped onto the road side by side. Above them, on the city wall, stood Du Yan and his wife of the Ding clan. Beside the couple was an old man whose appearance was so ordinary that he could have vanished into any crowd. Yet the moment that old man entered their sight, the entire battlefield seemed to sink beneath an invisible weight. Du Yan smiled and turned toward him.
Old ancestor, isn't it somewhat unfair for you to personally deal with these too?
The old man Du Mao smiled as though he had just heard a child's joke.
Unfair? Why did I suffer through cultivation if I cannot bully those beneath me? Did my cultivation base fall from a tree? I seized it through battle after battle, each one balanced between life and death. If my realm is higher than theirs, where exactly is the injustice?
Du Mao's words laid bare the cruelest law of the cultivation world. Power often invents its own morality. To him, surviving countless deadly trials did not create responsibility. It created permission, the permission to crush anyone too weak to resist.
As always, old ancestor, your reasoning is flawless.
A trace of hesitation then entered Du Yan's expression.
What should we do about Chen Ping'an?
I've heard that name. That fool from our clan borrowed our strongest artifact and still failed to kill the great demon that ravaged Planchette writing sect. Swordsman struck the final blow instead, yet Jiang Shangzhen somehow harvested the benefits. I know of that swordsman. His name is Zuo Yu, a disciple of the scholarly sage. During the past century, he shattered the sword hearts of countless gifted young swordsmen across the continents. Cao Jun of Southern World Continent was merely one among them. There was a time when virtually everyone beneath the heavens knew his name. But after the scholarly sage confined himself within the forest of virtue, Zuo Yu seemed to disappear. His swordsmanship may well be unrivaled beneath the heavens. After killing that demon, he specifically asked about Chen Ping'an. That alone tells me this boy has deep ties to the scholarly sage.
A chill crawled across Du Yan's skin. If Du Mao, an ancestor whose eyes were fixed upon the summit of cultivation, could praise Zuo Yu so highly, then the swordsman's strength was nearly impossible to imagine. Du Yan assumed that Chen Ping'an's connection to the scholarly sage would become a shield, while Zheng Dafeng's death had already been written. But Du Mao's next words overturned that assumption.
Why else do you think I ordered you to bring that ship? I am waiting for Zuo Yu. I do not fear that he will come. I fear only that he will remain absent, leaving me to carry my bonded item here for nothing.
This was the moment the scale of Du Mao's ambition became clear. Zheng Dafeng was prey, Chen Ping'an was bait, and Zuo Yu was the true opponent he wished to draw from hiding. Du Mao had not entered Old Dragon City merely to kill. He had come seeking a battle worthy of displaying his 6 centuries of preparation. Du Yan's eyes brightened with excitement. He bowed deeply.
Your courage and bearing truly have no equal, old ancestor.
Enough flattery. If you possess any ability, climb to my height. Then your own descendants can trample one another for the privilege of flattering you.
Such lofty heights are beyond someone like me.
Which is why you are destined to remain worthless. Your only fortune is sharing my surname.
Instead of showing shame, Du Yan smiled even more brightly.
But surely good fortune is also a kind of ability.
On that point, you are not entirely wrong.
Du Mao took one step from the city wall. In the blink of an eye, he was standing directly before Zheng Dafeng. Only 2 or 3 steps separated them. Du Mao's frame was small enough that he had to tilt his head upward to meet Zheng Dafeng's gaze. Yet there was nothing small about the pressure rolling from him.
I heard you once guarded the gate of Jewel Small World and served that old fellow surnamed Yang. If I kill you here, do you think he'll dare crawl out of his cage to seek revenge?
Zheng Dafeng gave no answer. His body moved before words could weaken his resolve. His fist tore through the air and struck Du Mao squarely. Du Mao did not block. With both hands clasped behind his back, he received the punch with his body alone. The impact forced him to slide several steps across the ground, but his posture remained as immovable as a mountain rooted beneath the earth. Zheng Dafeng, however, had already been pierced through the abdomen. A miniature ark, roughly twice the length of a man's arm, protruded from his body. Blood flowed around its hull as though the strange vessel had sailed directly through flesh and bone. The exchange exposed the hopeless gap between them. Zheng Dafeng's ninth-tier physique could force blood from Du Mao, but Du Mao's bonded weapon bypassed the contest of fists entirely. One man was gambling everything on the strength of his body. The other controlled a celestial weapon capable of striking from an angle ordinary martial instinct could not defend. Du Mao wiped a streak of blood from the corner of his mouth.
Is that all? I'm not even a pure martial artist. Aren't martial artists always boasting that a chi refiner's body is fragile as paper? Your punch has not convinced me.
He flicked the blood from his fingers and pointed toward the arc embedded in Zheng Dafeng's abdomen.
For clarity, that is not a swordsman's bonded flying sword. I despise swordsmen more than anyone. They do little besides flaunt themselves, and those so-called sword immortals are the most insufferably arrogant of all. Whenever I see them, I want to tear out their eyes and shove them where the sun cannot reach. Yet by the time I possessed enough strength to do so, I had risen high enough that the world's rules trapped me inside an even larger cage. Tell me, how could that not be infuriating?
Du Mao glanced at the sky with naked disdain, as if even the heavens were merely another jailer he intended to challenge. Zheng Dafeng surged forward again. He threw a second punch, driving every remaining ounce of strength into the attack. Du Mao shifted one step to the side. The fist missed. His palm landed on Zheng Dafeng's head, and with a casual shove, he sent the ninth-tier martial artist hurtling backward. Zheng Dafeng flew more than 1,000 feet. The miniature ark remained lodged inside him. He crashed into a spreading pool of his own blood, struggled to rise, collapsed, and tried again, only for his limbs to betray him each time. Du Mao turned toward Chen Ping'an.
Can you summon Zhuoyu to save you?
He did not wait for an answer. One sweep of his sleeve released an overwhelming force that struck Chen Ping'an like a raging tide. Chen Ping'an was thrown through the air. He twisted his body in mid-flight, turned the uncontrolled fall into a drifting arc, and landed with one foot driven deep into the earth. Only then did he finally halt his retreat. A faint trace of surprise appeared on Du Mao's face.
You are more capable than I expected. Perhaps you even have the potential to become something other than completely useless. Unfortunately, your surname is not Du, so there will be no loss if you die.
Du Mao raised one hand and lowered it with almost insulting gentleness. Above Old Dragon City, the sea of clouds split apart. A golden hand, as vast as a mountain, descended from the heavens, covering Chen Ping'an beneath its shadow. Chen Ping'an answered with the rain evaporation technique. Power erupted from his body. Dust and shattered earth exploded across a radius of 1,000 feet, swallowing the battlefield beneath a vast dark cloud. When the dust began to settle, a colossal crater scarred the ground. Chen Ping'an climbed the slanted slope step by step until his bloodied figure once again entered Du Mao's sight. Surviving the Golden Hand was not victory. It was proof of Chen Ping'an's foundation, resilience, and combat instinct. Against an ordinary opponent, such endurance could reverse the battle. Against Du Mao, it merely encouraged the old monster to strike harder. Du Mao briefly surveyed the surroundings.
It seems Zhuoyu is not your Dao guardian. In that case, no one is coming to save you.
Golden sweet wine had already revealed its true form, yet before Chen Ping'an could seize any opportunity, an invisible force caught him and hurled him away as if he weighed no more than a stone. He tumbled in a long arc and smashed into the city wall behind Du Mao.
What use is limitless potential? You have not reached the upper 5 tiers. Until then, you are still only trash.
Without looking back, Du Mao flicked one finger toward the wall. Cracks spread across the immense structure like black lightning. Chen Ping'an was driven straight through the stone. leaving a massive hole before crashing into the outer city beyond. Du Mao scratched his head and waited. No sword light descended. No hidden guardian appeared. The silence itself seemed to confirm Chen Ping'an's abandonment. At last, Zheng Dafeng forced himself onto one knee. Blood covered his mouth and chest, but he still raised his head.
Go ahead and snap that old pipe of yours. I would like to see whether the old man comes personally, or whether he merely throws some petty trick at me from inside Jewel's small world.
Zheng Dafeng coughed up a mouthful of blood.
Kill me. Let Chen Ping'an go.
Du Mao shook his head.
If the old man from Jewel's small world stood before me and made that request, perhaps I might consider it. But you...
His voice suddenly stopped. Du Mao turned, his brows drawing together for the first time. Chen Ping'an had returned to the enormous breach in the city wall. He could barely remain standing, but one blood-soaked hand was raised above his head, holding a single object for all of Old Dragon City to see. The old maidservant of the Cloud Forest Jiang clan recognized it immediately. Her face darkened.
That is the core of an upper 5 tiers beast. If it has been refined for detonation, it could destroy half of Old Dragon City.
Fu Nanhua answered with a confident smile.
He would never do that.
The old maidservant raised an eyebrow.
That is precisely how foolish he is. Even if death stands before him, he will not gamble with the lives of countless innocent people.
Sun Jiashu released a sorrowful sigh. He knew Fu Nanhua was right. Chen Ping'an would threaten himself, sacrifice himself, and even trade away a treasure beyond price. But he would not slaughter half a city to purchase his own survival. That conviction was both Chen Ping'an's greatest strength and the weakness his enemies understood best. Because he possessed a boundary he would never cross, those without boundaries could predict him, corner him, and use innocent lives as invisible chains around his hands. Sun Jiashu took one step forward, but the Sun Clan's nascent tier ancestor immediately seized his shoulder.
Not now. If you intervene, the Sun Clan's entire plan will collapse.
Sun Jiashu struggled, but the old man's grip did not move by even an inch.
I have allowed you to act recklessly in other matters, but you will obey me today. This concerns far more than your personal feelings.
Sun Jiashu opened his mouth to protest. Before a single word emerged, the ancestor struck and rendered him unconscious. At the edge of the shattered wall, Chen Ping'an slowly sat down. I offer this beast core in exchange for Zheng Dafeng's life. The distance between them was vast, but Du Mao heard every word. Amusement surfaced in his eyes.
Since when did the life of a 9th-tier martial artist become so expensive?
He considered the offer for only a moment.
9th-tier martial artists are uncommon, but they remain less precious than a 12th-tier beast core. Very well, I accept.
Du Mao reached across the distance. An unseen force tore the beast core from Chen Ping'an's grasp and delivered it into his hand. He calmly stored it away. Then his smile turned cold.
I promised to spare Zheng Dafeng's life. I made no promise regarding his cultivation.
His foot descended onto Zheng Dafeng's back. A chain of sharp cracks rang from the martial artist's spine. Zheng Dafeng collapsed, limp and powerless, as though every bone supporting his body had been torn away. Du Mao had honored the wording of the bargain while destroying its meaning. Zheng Dafeng remained alive, but that the cultivation he had earned through a lifetime of hardship had been crushed beneath one foot. This was not mercy, it was domination disguised as fairness. Du Mao turned back toward the broken wall.
Now, what will you offer for your own life? Remember, it must be even more valuable than a 12th-tier beast core.
Chen Ping'an sat cross-legged upon the ruined stone. Blood covered him so completely that his face could no longer be clearly distinguished.
I am rarely this patient, but today I will make an exception. Take some time and think.
The miniature vessel under Du Mao's command was no ordinary treasure. It was his bonded celestial weapon, the sword-devouring ark. Its foundation had been forged from the complete carcass of an ancient treasure-swallowing whale. The refinement lasted 600 years, and throughout those 6 centuries, Parasol Leaf Sect poured an immeasurable quantity of resources into its creation. That era was the only period in Parasol Leaf Sect's history when it had been forced to lower its head before Jade Tablet Sect. The disaster began when Parasol Leaf Sect's leader died in an accident while traveling through Middle-earth Divine Continent. With no immortal tier cultivator remaining to stabilize the sect, Parasol Leaf Sect entered a brutal age of decline. During that dangerous transition, Du Mao drained the sect's accumulated wealth to complete his bonded weapon, then sealed himself in seclusion for centuries. When he finally emerged, his first act was not to rebuild alliances or display restraint. He sailed the giant ark to Jade Tablet Sect and challenged an unpolished J-tier sword immortal to a battle of life and death. The sword immortal died. His bonded flying sword was swallowed whole by the sword-devouring ark. A weapon capable of devouring a sword immortal's bonded flying sword was more than a treasure. It was Du Mao's answer to the sword path itself, a 600-year declaration that even the proudest sword could become food for his ark. That history explained both his hatred of swordsmen and his hunger to confront Zuo Yu. After waiting a while, Du Mao spoke again.
Have you found anything worth offering?
Chen Ping'an shook his head. I have nothing left.
Your sword-nurturing gourd is respectable, and that ancient-looking jade tablet appears to be a minimization treasure. Unfortunately, even together they cannot purchase your life. Besides, once you are dead, both will belong to me regardless.
Chen Ping'an lowered his head and gently patted the sword-nurturing gourd. A strange smile appeared beneath the blood. It seems my road ends here. If you can escape, then go. His trembling left hand reached for the jade tablet at his waist. He removed it and squeezed with every fragment of strength remaining in his body. He did not wish to use it. He did not wish to trade it. He simply refused to allow it to fall into another person's hands. Yet the minimization treasure remained unbroken. Guilt filled Chen Ping'an's eyes. Beneath that guilt, indignation slowly rose. He had never been someone who blamed the heavens, cursed fate, or pushed responsibility onto others. But at this moment, surrounded by shattered stone, broken companions, and an enemy whose realm made resistance seem meaningless, he could no longer silence the thought burning in his heart. It was unfair. For Chen Ping'an, this was not fear of death alone. He had fought, endured, reasoned, bargained, and surrendered a treasure capable of shaking Old Dragon City. Yet strength still allowed Du Mao to rewrite every bargain after accepting its price. The despair came from discovering that effort and righteousness did not always receive an answer. Chen Ping'an raised his left arm across his face. Tears escaped his eyes, but he refused to let anyone witness that final moment of weakness. Then he lowered his arm. He looked once toward the south and closed his eyes. I have a sword, one that can shift mountains, divide rivers, and overturn the seas. Du Mao looked amused rather than alarmed.
What nonsense are you muttering? Shouldn't your final breath be used to curse me for crushing someone as weak as you?
The sword-devouring arc flashed forward. It pierced through Chen Ping'an's abdomen. At that exact instant, the jade tablet shattered. Du Mao's brows furrowed, yet to an expert possessing treasures and power beyond ordinary imagination, The destruction of a single minimization treasure was no more than a minor disappointment. But Du Mao had misunderstood what had just broken. The jade tablet was not merely lost treasure. It was a barrier, a seal, and perhaps a final thread connecting Chen Ping'an to forces that had remained silent until now. The old ancestor believed he had ended the struggle. In truth, he had struck the bell that summoned the storm. Far away, on the summit of Tassel Mountain, the old scholar had been quietly performing divination. Without warning, his expression changed. He sprang to his feet. The usual humor vanished from his face, replaced by a severity rarely seen.
Help me cut through the barriers separating the two continents. Do not ask why, hurry.
The armored Tassel Mountain god asked no questions, he simply nodded. His mountainous golden Tao manifestation rose above the summit. Divine radiance covered the sky as he swung his sword and cleaved through the fabric of time and space. A rift opened between continents. The old scholar entered at once. Behind him, the wound in space slowly sealed, while the land and water fortune of Tassel Mountain churned in violent unrest. At the same moment, across an unimaginable distance, someone heard the words Chen Ping'an had spoken in Old Dragon City. A gentle female voice answered,
I am coming.
Jewel's small world began to tremble. Mountains shook. Rivers swayed. The entire small world groaned, as though an ancient power had awakened and was forcing its way beyond the boundaries that contained it. Ruanqiang exerted every ounce of his cultivation to prevent the world from collapsing. From a cliff face scarred with dragon-slaying platforms, a tall figure in white flew into the open sky. Her broad white sleeves streamed behind her like banners of snow. For one brief moment, she stood above majestic world and turned her gaze toward the southernmost reaches of eastern treasured vile continent. Then she moved. Her body became a streak of white swordlight tearing across the heavens. Thunder erupted again and again behind her, each blast announcing that the distance to Old Dragon City was being severed by force. Du Mao had waited for Zuo Yu, believing the greatest threat would arrive in the form of a famous swordsman. Yet the answer to Chen Ping'an's dying call came from elsewhere, from Tassel Mountain, from Jewel's small world, and from a white-robed figure whose arrival shook heaven and earth. The sword had not yet reached Old Dragon City, but it had already been unsheathed. Beneath the boundless sea of clouds, an invisible decree descended upon Old Dragon City. Every street west of the dragon scaling platform, every courtyard north of the ferry station island, every drifting mote of dust and trembling breath, everything was locked in absolute stillness. Time itself had been seized by an unseen hand. The instant Fan Zhumao saw that pristine white figure descending from the heavens, yearning and memories surged across her face like a tide breaking through an ancient dam. Her eyes reddened. Tears gathered before she could restrain them. She rose, opened her mouth, and found that no words in the world were worthy of this reunion. In the end, she quietly sat upon the sea of clouds in the most formal posture she knew, greeting the newcomer with reverence that bordered on worship. Outside the dust medicinal shop, Pei Chen still gripped her hiking pole and unleashed the chaotic movements of the deranged demon sword techniques. She knew nothing of the power that had frozen the city around her. Even the Zhao clan Yin's soul had fallen utterly motionless, yet the young girl continued swinging her pole as though the alley were still an ordinary training ground. In a wealthy outer city manor, a short old man was about to cross his threshold when his brows tightened. Instinct warned him before reason could speak. He withdrew his foot, remained physically still, and let only his eyes move. After a brief calculation, he abandoned the idea of leaving in the flesh and instead released his yin soul to investigate. This single decision, revealed the terror of the power covering Old Dragon City. Even seasoned cultivators did not dare test it with their true bodies. When the laws of heaven and earth suddenly become unfamiliar, caution is no longer cowardice. It is the difference between survival and extinction. At the eastern gate, the old maidservant of the Cloud Forest, Zhang Clan, strained until her face turned crimson. Her bonded flying sword buzzed violently inside her acupoint, lending her just enough perception to glimpse a few blurred fragments of the impossible scene unfolding within the frozen city. Near the shattered wall, the patriarch of Parasol Leaf Sect narrowed his eyes. His sword-devouring arc hovered beside him in eerie silence, peaceful only on the surface, like a celestial beast waiting for its master's command. From the gaping hole in the city wall emerged a tall woman in a pristine white robe. Her sleeves flowed freely, untouched by the ruin around her. She seated herself upon a mound of broken stone while cradling a young man in her arms. Chen Ping'an's golden sweet wine Dao robe had been almost completely destroyed. His body was covered in severe injuries, and consciousness had long since abandoned him. The woman lowered her gaze, raised one finger, and gently smoothed the tightly furrowed lines between his brows. That quiet gesture carried more weight than thunder. She had crossed an immeasurable distance, shattered the stillness of Old Dragon City, and ignored an Ascension tier expert. Yet the first thing she did was ease the pain written on Chen Ping'an's face. Her killing intent had not yet erupted, but its reason was already unmistakable. Not far away stood an old Confucian scholar in shabby robes. He slapped his forehead, his frustration spilling out before he could restrain it.
How could you be so reckless? Do you know how hard I had to work to conceal your presence? Just how much of a commotion are you trying to cause? If the tassel-mounting god hadn't done me an enormous favor and allowed me to jump directly to the northern region of eastern treasured vile continent, the whole world would already know that you had arrived. How is Chen Ping'an supposed to cultivate in peace after that?
The white-robed woman gave no answer. Faced with her silence, the scholarly sage's anger faltered, and a sheepish expression crept across his face. He sighed, ignored the patriarch of Parasol Leaf Sect as though the Ascension tier cultivator did not exist, and strode toward the edge of the broken wall. He suppressed the fury burning in his chest, raised his head, and shouted into the frozen heavens.
Come out! Haven't the two of you been watching this spectacle from beginning to end? Why are you suddenly too frightened to show yourselves?
To the north, an indistinct figure condensed from nothingness. He was a middle-aged scholar with a golden jade pendant at his waist, engraved with the words, "Nourishing the Noble Spirit." To the south appeared another blurred scholar, this one elderly. His own golden pendant bore the inscription, "Those in high places should help the less privileged." The middle-aged scholar bowed respectfully toward the scholarly sage. The elderly scholar did not move at all. He did not bow, greet, or even spare the former sage the courtesy of a blink. The scholarly sage drew a long breath. Then he pointed directly at Dumao, patriarch of Parasol Leaf Sect, and fixed the elderly scholar with a furious stare.
You are the sage responsible for overseeing the northern region of Parasol Leaf Continent. If a 10th or 11th tier chi refiner wandered across the land, perhaps you could claim that heavenly affairs kept you too busy to notice. But this is an Ascension tier chi refiner. Have you gone blind? How could you fail to notice a lantern this enormous drifting right past your eyes?
The elderly scholar remained silent. The middle-aged scholar gave a faint sigh. He had, in fact, received advance notice of Dumao's journey to Old Dragon City, a city within his jurisdiction. The matter concerned the Song clan of the Great Li Empire, Planchette Writing Sect, and Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Before departing Parasol Leaf Sect, Dumao had reported his intentions to the elderly scholar. Yet the journey had been arranged too abruptly for Du Mao to obtain a proper passport from the Confucian schools. Faced with a violation committed by an Ascension tier cultivator, the middle-aged scholar had chosen to turn a blind eye. The failure here was not ignorance but compromise. One scholar had permitted the journey, while another had silently allowed it to continue. Each may have believed that a temporary exception served the greater situation, yet together their silence opened the road for catastrophe. Rules rarely collapse beneath one great blow. More often, they erode through 1,000 convenient omissions. The restrictions placed upon Ascension tier cultivators came from an uncompromising law established by the etiquette sage. From the beginning, that law had provoked fierce resistance. Powerful cultivators had even mocked his supposed unconditional love for all living beings. Majestic World still contained countless demons. Yet instead of exterminating them all, the etiquette sage imposed strict restraints upon his own people. Cultivators beyond a certain realm had to report their movements and obtain approval from the Confucian schools before acting. In Heavenly World, governed by the 3 branches of Taoism, Ascension tier cultivators could remain in White Jade Capital or depart as they pleased. Thus, many in Majestic World demanded to know why their strongest cultivators were treated as though they lived upon a leash. The law was never merely about restricting power. An Ascension tier cultivator could overturn mountains, fracture nations, and drag countless ordinary lives into a dispute with a single decision. The greater the cultivation, the less private one's actions became. Yet a law without impartial enforcement was only an inscription carved upon rotting wood. Du Mao, increasingly displeased at being ignored, clasped one hand behind his back and scratched his head with the other.
So you're the scholarly sage?
The scholarly sage did not even look at him. His words remained aimed at the 2 Confucian saints.
Both of you are prized disciples of the second sage. Surely he taught you the importance of empathy and shame.
His accusation was precise. Empathy was directed toward the middle-aged scholar overseeing southern eastern treasured Veil continent. Shame was reserved for the elderly scholar who had permitted Du Mao to cross into Old Dragon City. Those whose statues stood within the Confucian temples beside the founding father could truly be called sages, their status surpassing even that of an Academy Mountain Master. Yet within the formal order of Majestic World, these 2 remained among the 72 officially recognized saints.
Your teacher also said that both life and justice are desirable, but when only one can be chosen, life must be sacrificed in pursuit of justice. Right now, Chen Ping'an is teaching the 2 of you that lesson. The second sage clearly failed to teach it properly, so it is only right that you relearn it from a child.
Chen Ping'an's cultivation was insignificant beside an Ascension tier patriarch, but that was precisely the point. Justice measured by strength was not justice at all. The wounded young man had risked everything, despite knowing the difference in power, while those entrusted with defending principle had hidden behind authority and calculation. A cold light entered the elderly scholar's eyes.
You no longer have a place in the Confucian temples, and your scholarly lineage has already been severed. You should speak of my teacher with greater respect.
The scholarly sage's fury erupted at once.
I'm already doing him a favor by not calling him an old bastard. Who do you think you are? It was only through your useless writings and hollow theoretical prose that you fraudulently claimed a place in the Confucian temples.
The elderly scholar remained expressionless, though a trace of mockery curled at the edge of his lips. The scholarly sage patted his chest and tried to force down his anger.
Don't become angry. Use words and morality to guide others toward the light.
He sighed, but the wariness in that breath could not extinguish the indignation in his eyes.
Both of you know that I am powerless to do anything to you now. That is why you dare to oppose me like this, isn't it?
The middle-aged scholar shook his head.
I do not dare to offend you, nor do I have any desire to do so.
The elderly scholar's sneer sharpened.
Your teachings are like a dead fly fallen into a pot of exquisite broth, a putrid stain upon the legacy of Confucian orthodoxy.
He stepped forward, openly pressing his advantage.
I am saying this directly to your face. What are you going to do about it?
The scholarly sage became so furious that laughter burst from his throat.
When I stood at the height of my power, you studied my teachings and books like the most diligent of children. Have you forgotten? You even went to Qichen and begged him to teach you. And how did that end? Qichen has committed few decent acts in his life, but he was absolutely correct when he called you a fool who learned nothing from the second sage except pretentiousness. He once suggested that Confucianism create the title of phony noble person for men like you if he ever spoke one undeniable truth in his life. That was it.
A helpless smile appeared on the middle-aged scholar's face. The elderly scholar, however, displayed astonishing composure, standing calmly beneath the barrage of insults. Their clash was no longer a dispute between individuals. It was a collision between living principle and institutional pride. One side had lost his statue and lineage, but still clung to what he believed was right. The other possessed official legitimacy, yet treated authority itself as proof of righteousness. The scholarly sage raised his head toward the heavens, and his anger gradually gave way to sorrow.
A noble person may deceive others only within the realm of reason. The second sage said that himself. I understand that your intention was to place another set of shackles upon the scholars of the world, echoing the Founding Fathers' teaching that self-restraint and adherence to proper etiquette are virtues. But look at this world. Your intentions may have been good, yet everything has strayed far from the proper path. You need not look anywhere else. Look at this disciple of yours. Because matters have deteriorated so badly, the mountain master of a Confucian school, a disciple of the etiquette sage, had to beg Bai Zhe to intervene. And what was Bai Zhe's answer? He wished to see more of the world before deciding. What more remains to be seen? In my opinion, he has already seen enough. This world is no longer what it once was, and the hearts of its people have changed. When we last exchanged ideas, both of us believed that although the great Tao had changed, the people of the present could still surpass those of ancient times. Looking back now, what a bitter joke that belief has become.
For all his sharp insults, this was the scholarly sage's true wound. He was not merely angry that others opposed him. He was grieving because ideals once debated beneath clear skies had hardened into tools of convenience, while the people charged with protecting morality had learned to explain away their own failures. The middle-aged scholar turned toward the elderly one and spoke with a faint smile.
Perhaps you should apologize.
What do I have to apologize for?
The middle-aged scholar remained silent for a moment before answering.
Severing a scholarly lineage should only target its teachings. The masses should be allowed to decide who is right. Their judgment should not be forced through power or authority. An Ascension Tier Chi refiner has provoked a divine lord acknowledged by the four sages and attacked a young man who may be a disciple of the scholarly sage. That is inappropriate, and it stands against the teachings of Confucianism.
I see only the greater situation and what is necessary for the continued heritage of Confucianism.
The middle-aged scholar could only shake his head. The phrase greater situation often sounds noble, yet here it served as armor against responsibility. Heritage without justice becomes an empty shell, and principle preserved by sacrificing the innocent has already betrayed itself. The scholarly sage sat upon the edge of the shattered wall, looking suddenly older beneath the weight of the argument.
Whether you believe I am right or wrong, some principles remain true regardless. You simply do not understand them.
At that moment, the white-robed woman finally spoke. Her voice was cold enough to cut through every argument.
Are you done?
The scholarly sage nodded. His shoulders sank, and he folded his hands over his knees like a man who had spent the last of his strength.
I'm done. I concealed your aura for the entire journey, and then had to lecture two ignorant fools. I am completely exhausted. Founding Father, Etiquette Sage, Second Sage. It seems all the teachings I developed will be returned to this world without anyone truly accepting them.
The woman gently lowered Chen Ping'an onto the ground. Then she rose and walked to the scholarly sage's side.
Since you are finished, it is my turn to say what I came to say. Let me make one thing clear first. If you dare stand in my way, I will.
The scholarly sage interrupted her with a shake of his head.
I will not stand in your way. It was because of my incompetence that little Qi died. Now little Ping'an is also on the verge of death. I have failed both of these disciples. I cannot even stop certain people from scrambling to eat filth. Why would I stop you when both reason and justice stand on your side?
With those words, the final restraint was removed. The scholarly sage had not granted her permission. Someone of her stature required none. He had simply acknowledged that whatever came next would not be blind vengeance, but judgment born from a debt of blood and principle. Dumao had watched the entire exchange with growing curiosity. At last he smiled and addressed the woman directly.
Who are you? I do not recall ever hearing of someone like you. Are you an Ascension Tier cultivator? Surely you are not an Ascension Tier cultivator who came all this way from Stalactite Mountain?
A strange light appeared in the middle-aged scholar's eyes. He glanced toward the elderly scholar in the south and found the latter's face grim. The white-robed woman exerted far more pressure upon him than the disgraced scholarly sage had. The woman yawned. With one unhurried step, she descended to the base of the city wall and began walking toward Dumao. At her waist hung an old, rust-covered sword blade. It possessed neither guard nor hilt, only its tip had been sharpened, polished until it gleamed with a brilliance almost painful to behold. No divine radiance covered the blade. No grand sword intent announced its name. Its rust made it appear discarded, yet the sharpened tip alone caused saints to feel threatened. In the martial world, the most terrifying weapons are often those that no longer need ornament to prove their worth.
If you attack, you will be breaking the rules of this world.
The woman continued walking as though she had heard nothing. She yawned again, looking less like a supreme swordswoman approaching an Ascension Tier patriarch and more like someone who had only just awakened from a long sleep. The blade was tied loosely at her waist. With every step, it swayed from side to side, its sharpened point flashing again and again like a cold star. Dumao tucked his hands into his sleeves. His thoughts raced as he attempted to divine the depths of her cultivation. Yet the moment his divination began, he discovered that the entire region had already been sealed. No calculation, heavenly deduction, or secret art could reveal anything. For the first time, Dumao lost the advantage of information. He could neither read her realm nor measure her intent. An Ascension Tier cultivator was accustomed to seeing through lesser opponents, but before this woman, even divination itself had been blinded. Still approaching Dumao, the woman turned her head toward the middle-aged scholar.
Compared with your little friend over there, you are not entirely hopeless. I will spare you get out of here.
The middle-aged scholar frowned slightly. Before he could respond, he saw the scholarly sage wave a dismissive hand. After a moment of hesitation, his indistinct figure faded from the region where time remained frozen. The woman turned toward the elderly scholar. This time, not even a fragment of courtesy remained.
Piss off.
Do you truly intend to oppose the great Tao of this world?
The woman tilted her head. One finger descended and rested lightly upon the top of the rusty blade.
I have only sharpened the tip so far, but that should be enough to cleave Stalactite Mountain in two. How about I open a door between Majestic World and Savage World?
The elderly scholar's expression changed drastically. The threat was not an empty boast. She was speaking of tearing through the boundary of worlds as casually as another swordsman might cut open a wooden gate.
You would not dare.
She ignored him. Her finger pressed forward, and the ancient blade thrust out with almost no visible force. The elderly scholar vanished in a flash. In the same instant, the rusty blade disappeared from Old Dragon City. A vast hole was ripped through the sky of the artificial small world, and the sword tore toward Stalactite Mountain, crossing immeasurable distance in the blink of an eye. The warning had become action before anyone could breathe. She did not argue over whether she dared. She simply sent the answer flying across the world. At that moment, rank, institution, and distance all became meaningless before the edge of her sword. The scholarly sage watched with complete indifference, showing neither concern nor surprise. Far away, upon the vast sea between Southern World Continent and Parasol Leaf Continent, a swordsman suddenly raised his head. The sea before him split apart. Mountain-high waves rose on both sides and thundered toward distant shores. Such waves posed no threat to him, yet the aura of the passing sword left him stunned. Since when had Majestic World possessed a swordsman capable of releasing such a blade? For an instant, he wondered whether Aliang had once again been forced down from the heavens by the Taoist's second disciple. Yet he immediately rejected the thought. Even Aliang did not possess a sword like this. Among the four supreme swords of the four worlds, one had been passed through generations of great heavenly masters at the heavenly master residence of Middle-earth Divine Continent. Another belonged to the scholar who claimed to lack both intellect and aptitude, yet had once divided the Yellow River with a single sword strike. The third was held by the Taoist's second disciple. As for the final sword, the one Aliang proclaimed sovereign over all others, Aliang had departed Stalactite Mountain in search of it. That sword should have suited Aliang perfectly, yet somehow he had failed to claim it and could only ascend beyond the heavens empty-handed. The passing blade was powerful enough to force one of the world's great swordsmen to reconsider everything he knew about the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Its appearance did more than threaten Stalactite Mountain. It disturbed the balance among the greatest swords beneath heaven. Rather than chase the peerless flying sword, the swordsman abruptly returned to his senses. He changed direction at once and rushed toward the southernmost region of eastern treasured Vile Continent. Back in the frozen city, the elderly scholar pointed furiously at the woman.
Have you gone insane?
The woman did not slow. Her sword had crossed the world. Yet she continued toward Dumao with empty hands and the same unhurried steps. Dumao swallowed. The arrogance of an Ascension-tier patriarch finally gave way to a trace of unease.
You threw away your sword. Are you still planning to challenge me?
Amusement entered the woman's eyes, as though he had just spoken the funniest words she had heard in centuries.
Challenge you? Do you truly believe you are worthy of being challenged by me? You have no idea who I am, do you? Still, considering how young you are, perhaps you cannot be blamed.
Dumao had misunderstood the entire balance of power. To him, a duel was a contest between comparable experts. To her, this was never a duel. She had not come to prove herself, seize reputation, or exchange techniques. She had come to settle an account. The scholarly sage suddenly threw back his head and laughed with wild delight.
Do you know who slew the largest treasure-swallowing whale beneath the heavens in ancient times? I do, but I refuse to tell you.
The white-robed woman strode directly before Dumao, stopping no farther from him than Zheng Dafeng had stood earlier. She was tall enough to look down upon the Ascension Tier patriarch. Her gaze was colder than winter steel.
Why don't you attack me with that bonded celestial weapon of yours? I will not move at all. Go on, give it a try.
She stood unarmed, motionless, and within striking distance of a bonded celestial weapon. To Dumao, refusing the invitation would mean surrendering his dignity. Accepting it meant gambling his life against a woman whose sword had just crossed continents and torn open the sky. Every path before him had already been cut off. Humiliation overwhelmed caution. Dumao's expression twisted as his Ascension Tier power surged.
Insolent wench.
The sword-devouring arc erupted forward, carrying the might of a bonded celestial weapon as it hurtled straight toward the white-robed woman's head. Only a few meters separated Dumao from the white-robed woman. For a celestial weapon, such a distance was less than a heartbeat. The sword-devouring arc flashed forward, then froze before her face. It did not stop because Dumao had recalled it. It stopped because the weapon itself was trembling. Before the astonished eyes of Dumao and the elderly scholar, the renowned arc shuddered like a frightened beast forced before its natural predator. Its metallic hum sounded almost accusing, as though it were cursing its master for sending it into certain destruction. This was no ordinary suppression of rank or cultivation. A celestial weapon possessed instinct, and that instinct had recognized something more terrifying than Dumao could comprehend. Before the woman even swung her blade, the contest of power had already been decided.
Get down. You're blocking my view.
The sword-devouring arc obeyed at once. It lowered itself meekly and settled beside her foot like a domesticated animal. She still kicked it aside. Dumao raised a thumb and slowly wiped it across his lips. Those who knew him understood the meaning of that habitual gesture. The Ascension Tier cultivator was done testing the waters. From this moment onward, he intended to use everything he had. The woman released a faint sigh, not from fear, but from something closer to impatience.
You were fortunate. You lost only a bond treasure. That sword strike was meant to cut you instead. When I next appear on Parasol Leaf Continent, that fortune will not follow you.
Before Dumao could answer, the torn opening in heaven and earth convulsed. A colossal hand wrapped in an immense scholar's sleeve descended from beyond the world. 2 fingers closed around the old blade. The instant they made contact, the entire arm began to tremble. Only the sword's tip had been sharpened, yet even an almighty figure hidden beyond the small world found it difficult to stop. Righteous aura rolled across the sky, but the blade continued to resist between those enormous fingers. The trembling arm revealed the true scale of the weapon. The white-robed woman was frightening, but the old blade was equally extraordinary. Its edge did not merely cut flesh or artifacts. It challenged the laws that separated worlds.
Do not do this again.
The woman turned toward the opening in the heavens.
Would you prefer that I cut open the boundary between majestic world and heavenly world instead?
She beckoned with one hand. The old blade vanished from the giant fingers, reappeared in her grasp, effortless and obedient. The figure beyond the world remained concealed. With a turn of his wrist, his sleeve surged down like a river, breaking through its banks, and swallowed the elderly scholar whole.
Return with me. You will repent for what you have done in the Confucian temple.
The scholarly sage watched the elderly scholar disappear into the sleeve, and amusement immediately brightened his face.
Someone is about to suffer.
A cold harumph rolled down from beyond the sky.
You will clean up what remains. The Confucian temple will not interfere.
The scholarly sage's delight vanished. Rage flared across his face as swiftly as a struck flame.
Why should I be the one to clean this up? At least compensate me. Afterward, I'll visit the Confucian temple, throw out every statue except the old man's, and put my own statue beside his. Everyone knows the old man favored me most.
His shameless bargaining seemed absurd in the middle of a catastrophe, yet it also exposed the scholarly sage's extraordinary standing. Few beings in the world could shout threats toward the Confucian temple and expect anything except heavenly punishment. The hidden figure sighed from beyond the closing breach.
Fine, take this.
The hole in heaven sealed shut. From its fading edge, a golden jade pendant drifted downward through the air. It was not the elderly scholar's pendant bearing the principle that those in high positions should aid the less fortunate. This pendant had belonged to the middle-aged scholar, and upon it were the words, "Nourishing the noble spirit." The scholarly sage caught it, inspected it, and immediately looked pleased.
At last, a little compensation for all my effort.
The word little evidently offended the pendant's former owner. Instead of departing directly for Middle-earth divine continent, he left a boundless current of righteous aura pressing against the outside of the small world. The scholarly sage looked upward and shouted without the slightest restraint.
What? You want to fight me too? Shall I tell everyone why I lost that battle between third and fourth? Was it truly because your scholarly principles surpassed mine? Had Qi Jingchun and Zuo Yu not been among my disciples?
He rustled his sleeves and bent his knees, preparing to sit beneath the sky and reason with the almighty figure for as long as necessary. Only the Confucian sages and the upper 5 tiers immortals of Middle-earth divine continent had witnessed the scholarly sage at the height of his influence, when his arguments, cultivation, and presence had overwhelmed even the great sages of Buddhism and Taoism. Even Chan, despite turning his back on his master, could never speak of that age without reverence. This glimpse into the past explains why the scholarly sage remained so dangerous, even in decline. His greatest weapon was never merely cultivation. It was the authority of a man who had once forced 3 great traditions to listen when he spoke. The righteous aura withdrew without another word. The scholarly sage halted midway through sitting. He stared at the empty sky for a long while, carefully confirming that the hidden figure had truly departed. Only then did he bite the golden pendant.
It's genuine. Good, all that nonsense wasn't wasted after all.
The white-robed woman turned back toward Du Mao. A slight smile touched her face, but there was no warmth in it.
It appears your fortune is even worse than I expected.
The scholarly sage burst into laughter, delighted to add salt to the wound.
Haven't you always complained that Ascension tier cultivators are too restricted? Let her knock you back to the unpolished jade tier, then you'll be free to wander wherever you like. You came to sever my scholarly lineage, didn't you? How does it feel now? Of all the people I've seen in 10,000 years, your luck may be the worst. You should boast about it to anyone willing to listen.
The woman's expression suddenly turned cold.
Take care of my master.
The scholarly sage's laughter died instantly.
Rest assured, little Ping'an matters no less to me than he does to you.
Du Mao rolled up his sleeves. Though his celestial weapon had cowered and his plans were collapsing, the pride of an Ascension tier cultivator still burned in his eyes.
Even without the sword-devouring arc, I remain an Ascension tier cultivator.
The scholarly sage sneered. With a casual sweep of his sleeve, the sky directly above Du Mao split apart. The opening was neither grand nor majestic. It was only large enough for one man to pass through, and it led straight back to Majestic World. For the first time, Du Mao's composure began to crack. Confucian rules were not the only reason Ascension Tier cultivators hid inside blessed lands. Outside those shelters, their overwhelming cultivation could provoke the great Tao itself, drawing down backlash powerful enough to wound or destroy them. The scholarly sage had not opened an escape route. He had exposed Du Mao to the heavens. For an Ascension Tier cultivator, that narrow opening was closer to an execution platform than a doorway. The white-robed woman raised her blade.
Close it.
The scholarly sage nodded and the opening vanished. Panic stirred inside Du Mao, but the aggression on his face remained. A great cultivator could retreat, bargain, or change plans, but he could not allow his enemies to see him beg.
Do you truly value this young man so highly that you would drive me into a corner?
The woman gave a quiet chuckle.
So now you wish to reason with me?
She had seen through him completely. Du Mao was not suddenly merciful, nor had he developed respect for Chen Ping'an. He was merely trying to reduce the danger and secure a peaceful withdrawal. His journey north had carried 3 objectives. First, he wanted to witness Zuo Yu's swordsmanship. Second, he intended to test how much Divine Lord Yang of Jewel Small World would tolerate. Third, he sought a path into Eastern Treasured Vile Continent on behalf of Parasol Leaf Sect. If he could sever the scholarly sage's lineage along the way, he would gladly accept that additional reward. Yet 2 objectives had already been completed. Zuo, you was clearly not coming. 2 successes out of 3 were sufficient, especially now that remaining here could cost Du Mao far more than his plans were worth. Du Mao's retreat was perfectly consistent with his creed. Among cultivators, power stood above everything. Once he realized that the woman possessed greater power, his principles immediately transformed into negotiation. That hypocrisy was not an accident. It was the natural conclusion of the world he believed in. The white-robed woman tightened her fingers around the old blade.
When my master stood before you, did you offer him the chance to reason?
Du Mao did not flinch. Pride forced him onward, even when prudence urged silence.
With his present cultivation, he is worthless. Had I not wished to lure out Zuo Yu, he would never have been qualified to stand before me.
The woman gestured with her free hand. The scholarly sage sighed and reluctantly produced a scenic picture scroll.
Try not to ruin it completely.
The instant Du Mao saw the scroll, every trace of hesitation vanished. He pulled the sword-devouring arc back into his acupoint, summoned his golden Tao manifestation, and violently forced open the surrounding small world. Golden light erupted. Space cracked. Du Mao shot southward toward the South Sea with the speed of a man fleeing death itself. The woman did not pursue. The scholarly sage merely smiled and tossed the picture scroll into the air. One after another, Du Mao's golden Tao manifestation and the white-robed woman vanished from the world. The picture scroll stopped in mid-air before the scholarly sage. The small world around Old Dragon City sealed itself once more. Time across the city became still. Every person, every drifting speck of dust, and every unfinished movement froze in place. Only the old maidservant of the Cloud Forest Zhang clan retained enough strength to blink. Then came the sound of fabric tearing. Again, and again and again. Within the painted world, Du Mao's golden Tao manifestation and the woman's sword were ripping through mountains, rivers, skies, and the very fabric of the scroll. Every tear made the scholarly sage wince, as though someone were cutting pieces from his own flesh. Du Mao had chosen the correct tactical response. Flee immediately, deploy his manifestation, and use the celestial weapon without restraint. Yet inside a world controlled by the scholarly sage, against a swordswoman who treated realms as meaningless distinctions, even perfect strategy could only delay defeat. Less than 15 minutes later, the scholarly sage tapped one point on the picture scroll and hurriedly rolled it up before hiding it inside his sleeve. The white-robed woman slowly emerged from empty space. The old blade hung once more at her waist, its newly sharpened tip slightly dulled. She yawned into one hand. In the other, she held a severed leg. Behind her, Dumao was dragged from the scroll like a defeated dog, his earlier majesty nowhere to be found.
What was his name?
The scholarly sage wiped sweat from his forehead.
Dumao. Aside from the old Taoist priest of the East Sea, he is the strongest cultivator on Parasol Leaf Continent.
The woman nodded and tossed Dumao aside.
He had a few useful tricks. The moment he broke open the small world, his yin soul escaped back to his true body. This body is only his yang soul avatar.
The scholarly sage stared at the ruined avatar in silence.
Even so, that was still the body of a 12th-tier cultivator.
The woman sat cross-legged beside Chen Ping'an. Her killing intent disappeared as she gently lifted the unconscious young man into her arms. She looked into the distance.
Before my sword, there is no meaningful difference between the 12th tier and the 13th.
That declaration was not empty arrogance. Dumao's avatar had brought a golden Tao manifestation and a celestial weapon, yet she returned yawning. To her, the gulf that terrified the rest of the cultivation world was only another line waiting to be cut.
What became of the sword-devouring arc?
I stopped suppressing it and allowed him to use it freely. Then I destroyed it during the battle, otherwise I would have returned much sooner. I merely wanted to see what a so-called celestial weapon could actually do.
The scholarly sage wiped away another layer of sweat.
How have you been these past years?
The woman lowered her gaze to Chen Ping'an. His brows were tightly drawn, as though he remained trapped inside a nightmare. The scholarly sage had temporarily suppressed his injuries, but suppression was not healing. Painful days still awaited him. She gently smoothed the tension from his brow.
The cliff in the mountains of Jewel's small world was formed from the sword intent of my former owner. By right, it belonged to me. But too many years have passed. I no longer care enough to dispute its ownership. I reached an agreement with that ruin, whatever his name was. I granted him 30% of that dragon-slaying platform.
The scholarly sage glanced at the slightly dulled sword tip.
So you have been sharpening your blade against Ruanqiong's portion of the dragon-slaying platform?
No, I used the piece belonging to True Martial Mountain. Ruanqiong's piece is being kept for Little Ping'an.
The scholarly sage began sweating even more heavily. A dragon-slaying platform was already an unimaginable treasure, yet she treated one fragment as a whetstone and reserved another for Chen Ping'an. Her protection was not gentle charity. It was the preparation of a blade, patient, absolute, and intended for a distant future. The woman turned her eyes southward.
This matter is not finished.
The scholarly sage shook his head at once.
It is certainly not finished, but your part ends here. Leave what remains to me. That will be best for little Ping'an.
The woman considered his words, then nodded.
Once I return, I probably will not emerge again for a long time. But if I come out again and discover that you have turned everything into a disaster, I will find you. You have merged yourself with the great Tao of Majestic World. You know very well that I am the only one left in this world capable of killing you.
The scholarly sage forced a sheepish smile.
Why speak so harshly? We stand on the same side.
The woman shook her head.
Everything had been proceeding well until you insisted on accepting Little Ping'an as your disciple. That decision brought about this calamity. Had we not been on the same side, I would have cut you down already.
The scholarly sage glowered at her.
Do not say such hurtful things. Would you dare repeat that in front of your master?
I would not say it in front of him. I would simply do it behind his back. Whether he continues to acknowledge me afterward is irrelevant. He will remain my master regardless.
The scholarly sage found no answer. Her loyalty was uncompromising, but not obedient in the ordinary sense. She would protect her master's life, oppose his decisions, threaten his allies, and accept rejection without changing whom she served. That contradiction made her devotion far more formidable than simple submission. When the gift she had given Chen Ping'an shattered, 3 pieces of dragon-slaying platform had fallen from within it. Each was a different size. The smallest was roughly as long as a ruler, while the largest resembled a floor tile from a grand palace. The woman beckoned, drawing all 3 pieces into her hand. She then passed Chen Ping'an into the scholarly sage's care.
I'm going to settle a few remaining matters.
The scholarly sage sighed with resignation.
Please exercise some restraint.
She offered no reply and walked toward the nascent tier maidservant of the Cloud Forest Zhang clan. The woman extended 2 fingers and reached directly into the maidservant's acupoint. With a sharp pull, she forcibly extracted the old woman's bonded flying sword. The blade struggled between her index and middle fingers. She gradually increased the pressure until the sword bent like a drawn bow. The maidservant remained trapped by the laws of the small world. She could not move or speak. All she could offer was a pleading expression. The white-robed woman looked into her terrified eyes.
You want me to spare your flying sword? Then we shall follow my master's method. Explain why I should forgive you. If your reasoning is sound, I will spare the sword.
The demand was deliberately impossible. The maidservant did not possess enough power to produce even a single word within the frozen world. The woman's fingers continued to close. The sword bent farther. Then it snapped in 2. Blood flowed from the old maidservant's eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. A fracture spread across her golden core, while her nascent soul twisted in silent agony. The woman smiled.
Truthfully, I prefer the way people like you conduct yourselves. Before little Ping'an wakes, I must let you taste the methods you so readily use against others. Once he opens his eyes, I may not receive another opportunity.
She understood that Chen Ping'an's principles would restrain her. That was precisely why she acted before he awakened. Her vengeance was not presented as justice. It was a deliberate repayment carried out according to the cruel logic of those who had harmed him. She rose into the sky and crossed the distance to the sea of clouds above Old Dragon City in a single breath. Fan Junmao remained seated in her strange posture. When she raised her head, her eyes burned with reverence, awe, and almost feverish devotion.
I did not know that young man had become your new master.
The white-robed woman leaned forward slightly.
Should your ignorance be forgiven?
Fan Junmao shook her head without hesitation.
No ignorance is the gravest offense.
Exasperation flickered across the woman's face.
Why do you always appear so miserable whenever I see you? You are either hiding near the arch bridge and crying toward the sea of clouds, or kneeling upon those clouds as you are now. How am I supposed to kill you when you insist on looking this pathetic?
Fan Junmao's eyes shone even more brightly.
Then kill me. As long as you continue to exist, that alone is enough.
The woman gently lifted the old blade and spun it once through the air. The sword pierced Fan Junmao through the heart. With one hand, the woman raised Fan Junmao from the clouds, leaving her suspended upon the blade.
Did you believe I would not do it? Do you know how many people like you I have killed?
Blood appeared at the corner of Fan Junmao's lips, yet the light in her eyes did not dim. Pain had not broken her reverence. It had only confirmed it.
You have not changed. 10,000 years have passed, yet you have not changed in the slightest. Even after another 10,000 years, you will remain the same. Should you desire it, the entire world will bow before you, and...
The white-robed woman suddenly turned toward the city wall. In the next instant, she vanished from the sea of clouds. The old blade slipped free of Fan Junmao's chest and returned to the woman's waist as she disappeared. Fan Junmao collapsed with one hand pressed over her heart. Consciousness left her. But the surrounding sea of clouds immediately surged toward her body, pouring into her in a wild torrent. Fan Junmao's worship bordered on self-destruction. She did not seek mercy or reward. She wanted only proof that the legendary figure before her remained unchanged. The sword through her heart became in her mind an answer to 10,000 years of faith. At the breach in Old Dragon City's wall, Chen Ping'an had awakened. His eyes were clouded with confusion, and the scholarly sage was nowhere to be seen. Then a familiar white-robed figure descended before him, floating outside the ruined wall as lightly as snow falling from the heavens. Chen Ping'an looked at her, not with fear, but with the uncertainty of a student who believed he had failed. Did I do something wrong? The woman shook her head. I'll be more cautious next time. Perhaps I should study the naturalist art of divination. I thought I could resolve this matter myself. I did not expect that cultivator to be so powerful. The woman shook her head again. Chen Ping'an searched her expression carefully. You aren't disappointed in me? For the third time, she shook her head. He had awakened after facing an enemy beyond his understanding. Yet his first concern was not revenge, humiliation, or even his wounds. He feared only that he had chosen wrongly and disappointed the person whose judgment mattered to him. Warmth slowly returned to Chen Ping'an's face, his confusion eased, and a quiet smile appeared. The white-robed woman smiled as well. Behind that shared smile lay the true aftermath of the battle. A celestial weapon had been destroyed, an ascension tier avatar had been crippled, and powers beyond the small world had intervened. Yet for the two of them, the most important result was simpler. Chen Ping'an had not lost her faith, and she had not lost the master she had chosen.